It's a great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Jim Musser, who is chair of the Department of Pathology and Genomic Medicine at Houston Methodist. He's a well-known worldwide expert in infectious disease and genomics, and spent a lot of times with mycobacteria, I was told, until more recently when he started sequencing coronavirus, and we know why that happened. But today he's not going to talk about either. Looking forward to your talk, Dr. Musser.
Thanks very much. I'm reminded, old friend of mine, Stephen O'Brien, who is a geneticist who studied the big cats, cheetahs and so forth. His comment was always, an expert is someone from out of town with slides. So I'm from out of town, I got slides, but I'm still not an expert. So we're all in Texas. So this is going to be a bit of a Texas mixed grill talk. And I've listed 5 things here. Why worry about emerging infectious agents? Who cares? I'll talk about the role of Howard Ricketts and Burt Wolbach, and that'll be a minor part of the talk. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what and where is Rocky Mountain Laboratories. You all are taxpayers. It's funded with your tax dollars. And how does it fit into today's symposium? And then I'll talk a little bit about the Grace Commission, slide or 2. And for all of you who don't know about the Grace Commission, you'll know some crucial things hopefully by the time my talk is over. And then as a reminder, for everyone who's under 110 years old, for about 100 years ago, pathology and microbiology were really intimately entwined. Okay? You really couldn't pick up a pathology journal without seeing a lot about infectious disease-related stuff. So with that, let's move on. So I'm from Houston. We're the largest city in the United States, in the southern United States. Our risk of emerging and rapidly spreading infectious disease in Houston is huge. We're the 4th largest city. There's 7.4 million souls there. We're home to about 20% of the nation's oil refinery capacity. It could be even more now, I'm not sure. And then you see some of the other things that make us at Methodist concerned about being vigilant about emerging infectious diseases and so forth. As you know in the audience, below is simply a short list of many recent problematic pathogens. This is a very short list. Everyone remembers the H1N1 2009 problem. I know at many hospitals they couldn't get people out of the emergency room fast enough because all the beds were filled. There's, of course, MERS, chikungunya, Ebola, Zika, SARS-CoV-2, who wants to forget that? Monkeypox, H5N1, and then, of course, unfortunately, recently, measles is back, shall we say, in the mix. So I think the important thing for the group is that the pipeline of emerging infectious agents will always refill. It's just the way it is. It'll always refill and will very likely, in certain years, be it 2020 or else, it will overflow. So our job, I believe, is to remain vigilant and try to, if you will, head it off at the pass. So, a key take-home message, Ricketts got the glory, but Wolbach did the hard, meticulous, investigative work and extensive scholarship. Who knew? I will tell you that I have a lot of friends who work on Wolbachia, and they have no idea about Wolbach and his role as an investigative pathologist in Rocky Mountain spotted fever and so forth. A second take-home message to the young pathologists in the group, that is, everyone under 110, nothing can be more fun and more gratifying than investigating emerging infectious agents writ large, because there's really something for everyone. Okay? So it is a very gratifying thing, and Dr. Barrios, when you decide to do your PhD, I would be honored to do the paperwork for you to get you in, slip you in at Rice University or somewhere. But only if you do something on infectious agents. Okay, so Rocky Mountain Laboratories. So this is an example, I think, of site matters. My personal policy for decades, centuries now, is I never talk to people on airplanes. But some years ago, about 27 years ago, I was flying to New Zealand to give a talk in Christchurch, and I happened to be sitting next to a person, and after, I don't know, 11 and a half hours or something, and reading everything in the seat back that you can read, including some article about the world's largest haggis, I looked to my right, and there was a person there, and that was one of the authors here, Andrea Kahn. And Andrea is based in New York City. She is an urban planner, and we sort of stayed in touch, and we visited with each other, and our families visited with each other periodically. And she, when she was writing the second edition of this Site Matters book, she asked me to write a little, I don't know, 200-word something about the role of site in investigative science. And I said, oh my, I don't know anything about that. She said, you'll do fine, just write something. So I did, and it's in, so I haven't put this yet on my CV, but I'm debating about whether I should. So it's a very interesting book. Pardon?
Why not?
I don't know. But moving on. So Rocky Mountain Laboratories, a very brief history. So in the latter part of the 19th century, the vast majority, and I'm talking 90% or more, of copper was mined in northwestern Montana, in the area around Anaconda and Butte. Wood was required to fire the smelters. The wood was harvested in the Bitterroot River Valley. I've got a map later on I'll show you, in very western Montana. Marcus Daly, one of the copper barons at the time, he was the copper baron at the time, had a summer home in Hamilton, Montana. Unfortunately, many of the loggers and settlers were dying of an entity called black measles. And you saw it on my first slide, the lesions of black measles. And this was a tremendous economic and growth problem in that area of Montana, and obviously it had detrimental effects on the growth of the copper industry as well. So in the early 20th century, several investigators traveled to the area in and around Hamilton, Montana, in an attempt to identify the cause. And that led to the birth of a nascent laboratory. And here you see Howard Ricketts' nascent tent laboratory in 1906. It's really, from my perspective, it's really the good old days of investigative pathology. And we'll come back to that in a bit. But Ricketts went there. He was at the University of Chicago. University of Chicago. He was based there. Burt Wolbach also was there for a while. He was mainly a Harvard person, but he grew up on the Great Plains of Nebraska. And one of the colleagues in our department grew up in the same town that Wolbach grew up in, Grand Island, Nebraska, if there are any Midwesterners here. And I won't use any names, but his initials are Randy Olson. He was convinced, and he had talked his mother into the fact that he was the most famous pathologist that ever came out of Grand Island. Well, then I told him about Wolbach, and he hasn't talked to me since. Many pathologists, microbiologists, entomologists, and public health, they've migrated to western Montana. I'll show you the map in the next slide. Ticks that are essentially egg machines are astoundingly plentiful in the spring and summer. They emerge on the snowmelt line in the spring, especially on the western slope of the Bitterroot Valley. You can scoop if anyone has an ectoparasite problem, close your ears. You can scoop up the ticks in your hands. They're so plentiful. Okay. And Ricketts, Wolbach, and others, some Rockefeller Institute bros, used guinea pigs, non-human primates, and other animals, and they deployed their egos to study this entity called black measles at the time. From a map standpoint, Hamilton is shown here with the cleverly placed red circle. I don't think I've got a pointer, but if I had a pointer, that worked. It's me. It's an operator problem. The western Montana-Idaho border is largely the Bitterroot Range. For those of you who have seen one or more of the so-called Yellowstone TV series, much of that is shot 20 miles south of Hamilton in a ranch, they call it the Dutton Ranch in the show, but it's actually a ranch that is on the National Historic Registry, and it's a beautiful area of the country if you ever end up there, as I did for a while. So western Montana, shown in red here, is the distribution of where spotted fever infection occurred. It's on the western slope of the valley, the western aspect of the valley. You see the Bitterroot River flowing through there, and then, of course, the characteristic black measles lesions of folks. And it's a very interesting, if you will, neck of the woods that is really in the so-called banana belt of Montana. Shown here are the Sapphire Mountains. Those are largely the eastern aspect of the Continental Divide. The Bitterroot Valley is in between, and then the Bitterroot Mountains are on the western aspect. And in that little valley there, basically, it hardly ever snows in the winter. Now, you can go up about 200 to 300 feet, or pardon me, 2,000 to 3,000 feet on the slopes, and that will, you can get all the snow you want. But in the valley floor, it rarely snows, and the temperature's relatively moderate, so the ticks do a great job wintering over, and they emerge on the snowmelt line, as I told you. So here's our egg machine. The tick shown there on the left. Basically, they transmutate blood, our blood and other blood, into eggs and more ticks. Ticks, blood, egg, ticks. Just keep repeating that mantra to yourself, and you'll know a lot about Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Okay? So, Wolbach published several papers early in the start of this 1916. One was this paper in which he showed that experimental spotted fever in guinea pigs and monkeys was possible to create, okay, by passaging blood from infected humans into those animals. And in fact, early on, the guinea pigs were used sort of as the diagnostic animal for showing that humans had Rocky Mountain spotted fever, because You would take the human blood, infect it into the guinea pigs, and you'd either get a pause up or pause up, pause down, readout. It's sort of unambiguous. If you get the pause up readout, you had Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Another paper, pardon me, right behind that was this one, the etiology and the occurrence of the parasite. He showed that the parasite was in the tick, and that was his second preliminary report. And then it really described the presence and distribution of the parasite in experimentally infected ticks that had fed on guinea pigs. And of course, they were not in control animals that had not been given infected human blood. A third paper is this one. It's a real excellent work, the etiology and pathology of RMSF. There's probably no other disease of man which is so accurately duplicated in animals. Okay? And he showed that in this paper. Now, the best paper of the lot, in my opinion, was this one. If you do nothing else in your life, if you do nothing else in your life, read this paper and read it to your family members and read it to your trainees, because they may get juiced about it if they get juiced about anything. So it's a real tour de force. Note the length. A bit of a, and remember, at the time, so what was going on in 1918?
Yeah,
we had this little flu pandemic. He was also publishing things on the flu pandemic essentially at the same time. I mean, did he have a twin brother? Not sure, but he was really a productive individual. This is from that paper. It goes through, I think, 10 separate autopsies. Several of them are listed here. Once again, for the younger folks in the audience, case 3 is interesting. They were doing the autopsy at 9:30 at night by tungsten light. So the next time someone in your department is complaining, feel free to trot out this. Case 4 was an interesting thing, and a young male adult laboratory technician who acquired it because his job was to take the human blood injected into guinea pigs. Unfortunately, he got the disease himself. And then characteristic of every male adolescent, be it 100 years ago or now, a male adolescent was repeatedly bitten by ticks, and as it says there, he was notoriously careless in regard to removing ticks, because they're all bulletproof. They don't need to remove the ticks. Okay? But it's a really nice paper. Please do read it. A few additional papers that weave into the mix. The first one, Dr. Woodward, David Walker. Is David anywhere in the audience? Is there anyone from UTMB in the audience? There you go. Okay, so David is just so good. He was so ahead of his time, and he really summarized the contributions of Burt Wolbach, showing that it was a rickettsial vasculitis updated. And Steve Dumler is also a pathologist. Ted Woodward, an infectious disease doc. The paper there I've listed, Victoria Harden, a historian. She really did a great job in this paper on the etiology of rickettsial diseases. I did this a few years back. We'll come back to that. I think that's maybe how I ended up here. So I sent it to someone to read, and he was kind enough to invite me to speak.
It was a good paper.
Thank you. It's a very short paper. The most important person in that paper is my lovely wife. She's not a pathologist, sadly, for her. She's a family practice doc who hates ticks. She just despises them, but that's another story. Okay, rickettsia, as I said, Ricketts got all the glory because he trotted off to Mexico and died of scrub typhus. Small obligatory intracellular bacterial pathogen, has many relatives. Rickettsia prowazekii is an interesting one, but I won't get into that. And the disease is clearly a vasculitis with increased capillary permeability and so forth. Just superb, outstanding powers of visual observation and description. Yeah? A lengthy postscript to the time at RML after the discovery of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Q fever, Coxiella burnetii, was discovered there by Cox. Yellow fever, all the yellow fever vaccines were produced there in World War II. The buildings are all on the National Historic Registry as a consequence. Kuru, slow viruses, and prions. Bill Hadlow, a veterinary pathologist, was studying this entity called scrapie in sheep. And Carlton Gajusek, Stanley Prusner got wind of this. Bruce Cheeseborough, who was a colleague of mine there, they were big time into slow viruses. And of course, Gajusek and Prusner won Nobel Prizes. Gajusek was originally addressing Kuru as he thought it was basically a genetic disease, but he was wrong. That's okay, we're all wrong. Plague, Yersinia pestis, and the role of feeding blockage in the flea. Basically, the fleas suck our blood, and then the fleas have an area of their throat in which the Yersinia pestis is replicating. The throat gets blocked. They eventually regurgitate and shoot a big bolus of Yersinia pestis into us. And we're often running with plague. There's a construction of a biosafety lab for there. I won't go into that. That was great fun. It's the only time in my life I got $72 million for a one-pager. But that's another story. And then more recently, Heinz Feldman, who runs the hot zone lab there, he studied Marburg and everything else that are listed there. So a lot of stuff still going on up there. Thank you, taxpayers. Willy Bergdorfer was based there. I was perversely Willy's boss. No one's Willy's boss, but I was allegedly on paper his boss. Camille, my wife, was his physician, so that was great fun. On this paper, there are the killer bees, Bergdorfer, Barber, and Jorge Benache. I put on a little symposium there in 2002 to commemorate the 20th anniversary of their science publication, and those three guys were still arguing about who should have been first author on the science paper. No, I'm not making this up. I mean, it's like, come on, guys. It's like cheapers, you know? Yeah, oops, sorry about that. I've never given a talk before, so I don't know how to work this. Okay, so let's talk about the Grace Commission. Anyone here know about the Grace Commission? I didn't think you would, and that's fine. Okay, under Reagan, when he was president, between 82 and 84, he created by executive order, and you'll start hearing things about the past as prologue. Any Shakespeare aficionados in here? Past as prologue is from The Tempest. This commission was created by executive order. It was chaired by J. Peter Grace of the W.R. Grace and Company. For the New Yorkers in the audience, there's a W.R. Grace building in New York City. All the vermiculite at the time, not all, but a good chunk of it was being harvested up around Libby, Montana, which is in the very northwestern aspect of Montana. So W.R. Grace was the chair of this committee. He chaired it and populated it with private sector CEOs mainly. There were no federal employees, many conflicts of interest by those CEOs. This time in our country brought us the so-called drain the swamp phraseology. The Grace Commission recommended shuttering of Rocky Mountain laboratories, but the saviors in this case, when the left side and the right side could still work across the aisle, were the Western political coalition, the Montana senators, the Idaho senators, the Wyoming senators. They all banded together and said, no, 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 no. You're not going to close Rocky Mountain Laboratories, okay? And that was a really good thing. Okay, so what pathogens may be on the horizon this year and beyond? There's a very long list of the so-called high consequence pathogens. They're predominantly, sadly, viruses. We need to stay ahead of the pathogens as best we can. Okay? A couple of books that I'm showing you here that are worth reading. The Restless Tide by a colleague of mine, actually that's not fair, a mentor of mine, Richard Krause. Dr. Krause was the head of NIAID before an individual named Tony Fauci became head. And Richard tagged out at the very beginning of the HIV problem and went down and became dean at Emory. Okay? He was a polymath and just a superb individual. And he wrote this book in '81 when the Surgeon General was telling the world that infectious diseases were conquered and so on and so forth. And Richard said, no, 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 no. They will be back. Vicky Hardin's book there on the right, superb book. It's very much worth reading. A couple of additional things. Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever by Dr. Akawa. On the left there, Laurie Garrett's great work, which now I think is about 30 years old. Really well done. And then John Gallen and Tony Fauci on emerging infectious diseases is shown there. John Gallen, unfortunately, is deceased. He stepped off a plane. Well, let's not go there. Emerging infectious agents, and the beat goes on. They are challenges to every city, every society, and the world. The challenges are immense and they're urgent. I've listed some of the reasons here: globalization, urbanization, bioterrorism, rogue nation states, susceptibility to infection, which we all were when SARS-CoV-2 emerged, the ease of genetic manipulation of pathogens. You can do it in your garage now, if you so choose. And then, of course, now, very unfortunately, strikingly poor or absent national leadership in this regard. So, several of us are based here in the Houston Methodist Hospital area, in the Texas Medical Center. The Houston Methodist complex, part of it's circled in red there. I thank everyone for giving 25 minutes of your life, which you will never be able to spend doing anything else at this point. Thanks for coming. Happy to take questions, complaints, but don't let me forget, last slide, a couple of years ago, I had to go back to RML to say some nice words about some folks who I hired who were retiring. And there at the coffee break on the table, there were cookies. And they were pretty tasty. So end there, and thank everyone for coming. Thanks.
Any questions for Dr. Musser?
Make them easy.
Well, I have
There's
it.
one.
Oh, there's one? Okay, please, if you have a chance.
Yeah, I'll shout it out. So I noticed a lot of the organisms that were studied from labs seem to have like bad bugs, I would say. Seem to have overlap with Fort Detrick and Frederick, Maryland, which is military base where they did a lot of research, I think, on some of the maybe weaponizing of some of these organisms. Do you have any comments on that?
I do. I think my bias, okay, from the scientific standpoint, I think hands down the scientists at RML, by and large, were better scientists than those at Fort Detrick because they had a different job to do, if you will. That was when I received largesse to build a BL4 lab at RML. I visited Detrick. It had fallen a little bit into disrepair. Then it's come back in some form. In fact, Heinz Feldman, who I mentioned, is going there to spearhead it up, and he'll buff it up. Yeah.
Tell us why rickets got all the glory and the organism was not named after Wolbach?
Yeah, I mean, rickets, the truth is, rickets described this intracellular thing originally, and then I think as importantly, he then trotted off and died. So, you know, that'll get you a name. I think there may be a better reason, but that's the one I'm using, and I'll stick to it. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.